Hello and welcome to this video on custom transitions within PTE AV Studio. As well as all those great transitions that come with this software, we can also make our own. We can also share them if we want to, of course, or we can import them from others. Custom transitions can be made as a single transition, but we can also make a set of transitions. This is the sort of thing that I mean. If we create a transition that slides in from one side, then we may as well continue that process for one that slides in on the other side, and then maybe from the top and also the bottom. Now this is easier than it sounds to create because we can clone a transition. Then we can adjust the settings we've already created to make up a set of 4. Now if you're watching on YouTube, I think you know the drill by now. Subscribe to my channel if you enjoy these videos, of course. But if you hit that notification bell, then YouTube will tell you whenever I post a new video. It's actually quite convenient. Remember too, these same videos can be downloaded in HD resolution from my website. Here I've opened up the main screen of PTE AV Studio. You'll notice I've got a few images in the file list here, but I haven't got anything in the slide list below. We don't actually need to select images to make custom transitions. To begin that process, we can go down to the bottom left to our project options, navigate to the transitions section, and down at the bottom left you can see manage transitions, and within that we can create a transition. There is another route, but it takes us to exactly the same set of screens. I'll cancel this just for a moment. We can go in via slide options, but you'll notice it's greyed out at the moment. To access custom transitions via that button, we do need to have at least one image selected into the slide list. Once we do, then you can see the button livens up. I can click it. We get the choice of either the main tab or the transitions, and it's the transitions that we need. Exactly the same screen, manage transitions and create a transition. Now here we see something very similar to what we're used to seeing with slide styles. We have the ability to create categories to place our custom transitions, and we can name the custom transition. So I've got a category already made called Barry's, and I'm just going to call this one Page. Going down further, I want to put it into the global storage. That means the custom transition will be available within PTE for any slideshow I make. I'm just going to make a single variant as opposed to these options. So the next thing I need to do is to click edit, and when I do that we see a familiar screen. It's the objects and animation screen. Now the first thing we notice in this particular screen is that it already contains 2 images, and we can see them over in the bottom right, called slide 1 and slide 2. These are just holding images for us to work with, because when our transition is made we can apply it between any image or video. So slide 1 represents an image in our timeline in the main window of PTE AV Studio, and slide 2 represents the next while we put our transition together. If we run a demo here, we're going to see that there's already a simple transition in place. It just moves slide 1 down the screen to reveal slide 2 beneath. I guess it's there as an example to us on how this screen works with transitions. So let me just quickly run that and you can see what I mean, so you can see what slide 1 is and what slide 2 is. But of course that does mean that we've got some corrections to do before we even start. We need to reset slide 1's end keyframe back to 0 in the pan Y, or it could get quite confusing. So if you look at slide 1, which I've selected, and I highlight the keyframe that ends the animation, you can see that slide 1 is slid down off the screen. I've got two choices. I could go to the animation and I could reset the pan Y, or I could just remove the keyframe altogether. I think what I'll do in this case is just double click the Y and it's reset back to 0. To make a single page turn transition, we're going to need 2 copies of both slide 1 and slide 2. So I'm going to use my control key to select both of them. I can right click and choose copy. Click into the grey area here to lose any selections because I want them to be independent of each other. Then right click and paste. There I have all 4 that I need. Now what I also should do, I think, is to go to slide 2 and the second keyframe, and I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to do the same with all of these apart from slide 1, because it's only slide 1 that's going to need to be animated to reveal slide 2. And you'll see how that's going to work as we move along the rest of the video. And I think what also may be useful, if I went to the second slide 1, the copy I made, if I just right click over the A and choose 0, just temporarily I'm going to turn both of these to 0, effectively just turning them off for a few moments. So it's slide 1 at the top of this stack, which is the one that's going to create the page that's going to turn over to reveal slide 2. So once we've got that selected and we select the first of the keyframes, we can go into the properties section at the top right. What we're looking for here is image crop. We need to tick this box, and in the options we have that open up, we need to crop from the left 50%. Let's do that. I'll just highlight the value and put in 50%. Now when we do that, the image looks almost like it's been cropped left and right. It actually hasn't, it's just that PTE AV Studio places it in the center of the frame by default. If we switch to the animation tab, what we need to do is to move the point where the image rotates, because at present it rotates in the center. For example, if we go to rotate Y, and I give you a little example of it, you can see the issue we have. I'll double click the Y to reset that. But what I need to do is to move the center point. The center point needs to be moved to -100. If we right click, we can select it instantly. And you can see what it does. It not only puts the rotation point in the correct place to turn the page, but it also places the image correctly on the right hand side of the screen. Now while we're still working on slide 1, we would need to put similar settings into the second keyframe. And it's one of the reasons I said earlier on that it may be a better option, or one option, to actually remove the keyframe entirely. Because if I was to do that with the delete key, I can go to my keyframe 1 and I can right click and I can clone that. So when I put that on the extreme right hand side, it has all of the values that we put into keyframe 1, and all I would need to do now is add the rotate Y to give it the page turn effect. So what we need here is something like this, and you can see what it is, -180. So once that's locked in, we're beginning to see the start of our custom transition. And again, while we've got number 1 or slide 1 selected, let's go to the start here. Recognize the fact that we're only going to be animating this with rotate Y, and put in place animation speed smooth. This will ensure our page turn starts and ends gently. Now we need to turn our attention to the other side of slide 1. and of course that's got to be slide 2. And it also has to be a child of slide 1. Now we can do that with copy and paste. So I'm going to select slide 2, right click, and I'm going to cut it. I'm going to select the top slide 1, the one that we've applied the animation to, right click, and with it selected I'm going to paste. We can see the difference. We can see how this now slide 2 is shown as the child of the parent, but it looks a little bit odd. Now, although I'm the author of this video, this is the tricky part for me with 3D animation, which is what we're doing here. If slide 2 is to be on the back of slide 1, the first thing we need to do is to apply a 180-degree Y rotation to the image, because the image needs to be round the other way, because we're not going to see this side of it, we're going to see the other side. And then we need to go into the properties and crop it on the right at 50%. Probably best demonstrated. So going up to the Y here, I'll right click and select 180. I'll go directly to my properties and tick the image crop, and from here I'll overtype the value 50 into the right hand side. Now we need to move that image over onto the right hand side. To do that we can go to the animation tab, and using the pan X, if we click and drag, we can drag it into position. Sometimes I find it's easier to just overtype the value, and the value we need here is 100. Now if I go back to the start of the transition and press play, we can see we've got a little bit of a problem here because we seem to have the same image on both sides. So let's go back to keyframe 1. The other thing we need to do is to tell the software not to show this particular side. Let's do that by going to the properties, and the option we want is down here. When we think about it, we don't want to show the back side of this image, do we? We only want the front side. So when we remove the tick, now things are beginning to look a little more normal. And once again, if I do a quick preview, at least we've got the right images on the right sides of the turning page. Now I think we've got used to the fact that slide 2 is the flower, so let's recreate the other side of the flower. For that we need to select slide 2, and before we do anything I think we ought to remember that we reset the transparency of this to 0. So I'm going to jump back to my animation tab, and I'm going to double click the opacity A to reset that. But what I need to do here is I need to crop 50% from the left. We can do that from the properties. So with that slide selected, there's my crop. I'll overtype the left 50, but then I need to go to my animation, because in the pan X I need to scroll to the right, and the value that I want is 50, which I find a little bit more convenient to type in rather than click and drag. Now it's always going to be a good idea to test what we've done at each stage, just to make sure things are going according to plan. So if we go to the extreme left of the timeline and I select it, we've got to place something in this black square to form the other side of the landscape. But if I press, better than pressing play, let me do this gradually. I'll drag the cursor along, because we can see the turning of the page is correct, and as it turns over we've got the left side being turned and the right side is in the correct place. So all we've really got to do now is to reinstate slide 1. So the first thing I need to do is to select it, and I'm going to go to the opacity and I can double click to reset it. As soon as I do, something odd seems to happen, because with the cursor at the extreme right we should be seeing slide 2 in its entirety. The only problem we have here is slide 1 is in the wrong place. It needs to be at the bottom of the stack. So with it highlighted, we can right click and we can shift the stacking order, but a convenient way to do this is Control Page Down. Now if I bring my cursor back and highlight the first keyframe and we drag the cursor line across, there we see the correct image. And I think we're just about done. So now we can go to the top right and close the Objects and Animation screen, and we can OK the creation of our custom transition and OK once again. So now I need to test things. I'm going to bring down a few of these images. The first of them, I'm not going to allow the page turn to work on the first image because it just looks odd coming from a black start. So I'm going to select image 2 and the last one. Then we can go down to our slide options. We can find the category, which I just call berries, and there's the option. We can see it being shown to us at the top right, and we do get the opportunity here to adjust the length of the transition, but we'll just select the 2 seconds and we'll take a look and see just how that looks. Once the first image is on screen, then the page turn will take over for the rest of the slides. Just the standard 2 seconds, and I think we can notice the gentle start and end of the animation. But everything is rather fast here, but who knows, we could have a presentation which needs this sort of speed. But of course, we can slow things down. Now coming back into PTE AV Studio, I've still got those slides all selected, and I'm going to change the transition length from the little box at the top left. So if I highlight that, and change that to 4 seconds, it'll change for all the rest of the slides. With them all still selected, if I click into the slide duration, you'll notice the slide duration automatically changes too, and that seems a little bit of an odd thing. Well, with a 4-second transition, we actually need 8 seconds for the page turn to work. So if we had too short a slide duration, then we're going to have problems with this working. But in practice, I would guess we'd probably want something like 12 seconds here. Maybe a lot more in some certain circumstances, but I'll set 12 seconds with a 4-second page turn, and we'll take a look at a demo of that too. My confession here is that I've never found 3D page turn animation very easy. Like everybody, I have to take things very slow and steady. I'll also make unforced errors at times, just as you will. It's all quite normal. As a short recap, I've made a clone of my page turn transition, and I've labelled the slide 1 and 2 a little differently. Let's take a look just to finish this video. To clone a transition, we go into the same options we used to create it. So I'm going to go down to my slide options. I'll clone this one, not the one that we created a few moments ago. Then we go to manage transitions, and there's the clone transition option. As soon as we do that, you can see it's created, revolve copy. I can then select that, go back to the manage transitions and choose to change transition settings. Now I can go into the actual settings of that revolve copy and I can make any changes I see fit. But what I want to do here, I want to go into this one, page with labels, so I'll go into that one and say change settings so we can take a look. But here I need my edit once again, so everything opens up as we remember it a few moments ago. So let me place my cursor back at the starting point and we'll see slide 1 in its entirety. Let's take a look from the bottom of the layered stack first. When we think about slide 1 at the bottom, that's just a standard image just sitting at the bottom of the stack. Nothing has been cropped, both the left and the right hand sides are both visible. But of course the right hand side is covered up by slide 2, which is our flower. This was the one where we had to do a little bit of cropping and move it over to the right hand side. Now let's just skip across slide 2, the part that is the child of the parent slide 1 at the top, because this one is the part that rotates 180 degrees on the Y axis. It's also the one we had to crop and we had to move the point where it rotates to make it swing from our center line now, but of course it's the edge of the crop we made. I suppose the most tricky part to get our head around is the child slide 2, because that has to sit on the back of slide 1. To achieve that, we not only have to do a crop, but we also have to do a rotation and make sure we see the right side of the image. So I hope labeling these slightly different is a bit of a help, and I'll include both of these transitions that you can download. Just one more thing before I go. I do run a photographic and audio-visual forum, and you can come along and join up. It's free, of course, and you can interact with others who share your interests, and me, of course. Thanks for watching.